Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today's topic for discussion includes the FATF review, which is going on, and we're hoping for a positive outcome. We'll be talking about that in detail, why Pakistan has been put on that grey list, which seems to look at those countries that have weak regulations when it comes to terror financing and money laundering. So we'll be talking about that in detail. Along with that, we'll also be talking about the repatriation of our Afghan brothers back to their country in a dignified way. So let's get this conversation started. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today for the discussion, we have first of all Air Commodore Ghulam Mujaddid Saab. He's a defense analyst, a regular on our show, and along with him we have Mohammad Sheraz, who is an academician and also a regular. Thank you, sir, for being here. Sir, let's begin this conversation with the fact that it has not yet been decided whether Pakistan has been given a 3-month reprieve, as was tweeted by Khwaja Asif, but it appears that might be the case. How important is it, sir, for Pakistan to avoid being placed on that list?
It is important from many perspectives that Pakistan must not be placed on the grey list of the FATF. Because it would restrict or hamper Pakistan's integration with the international financial system. The loans that we take from the international institutions and the remittances that Pakistanis send from abroad, they might be affected. The limits might be placed on a particular amount that can be sent by the expatriates, Pakistanis from outside or something, and many such measures that will impede Pakistan's integration or ultimately, of course, Pakistan's economic prowess. But basically, it's our integration as an active and benevolent member of the international financial system.
That is very dangerous and very problematic,
It is very
sir.
crucial for Pakistan's economy.
All right, Shiraz, in your opinion now, there's still a bit of confusion whether Pakistan has been given the 3 months reprieve or whether that is still under consideration. If we look at the tweet by the US State Department, they're still reviewing whether Pakistan should be placed on that list or not. The decision is supposed to come out today, but we still haven't got that decision. But it seems, it appears that we might be given a 3-month reprieve. How important is it for Pakistan to make the best use of that time, and whether 3 months is enough for Pakistan to show the results that the international community would like to see?
Pakistan has moved ahead, because before US moved its motion into the FATF, Pakistan, right after that motion, Pakistan submitted its own progress on the issue, especially against Jamaat al-Dawa and all these organizations. I think that will have an impact. And in the next 3 months, Pakistan can obviously move on from there, can bring about certain changes, because Pakistan has been making changes. Pakistan was once on the grey list.
Yes, from 2009 to 2015.
Exactly. And during that time period, Pakistan has shown some progress. That's why it was taken off the list. And the US factor, this time around, it's behaving in a different way. So we have to keep that thing in mind as well. So obviously, Pakistan needs to further, strengthen those measures which it has taken now and in the past as well, because of the fact that that is the only way forward. Russia or China, our supporters, and within that body can hold this pressure to a certain limit eventually, because US, France,
Germany,
UK,
Britain, yes.
So these are the major Western countries, at the moment, and it is sorry to see this kind of activity rather than it needs to be done on the monetary terms, on economic terms, and then based on facts, rather than on which is being thrived and pushed and directed based on political likes and dislikes. So I think that needs to be less apparent in such bodies, because that will hamper the original goal of the institution or the body which you have created. It will hamper their work and it will be used for other purposes. So that competition needs to be avoided, because that's what we see as the US has trying to reflect a scenario where we are going back to the Cold War, you can say, times, and then the distinction and the the otherwise contradictions which are now appearing at the moment between the East and the West in such organizations and bodies. I think that needs to stop, because Pakistan should not be targeted because of its efforts against terrorism.
That's right.
Pakistan should not be targeted because of it is, as the scholars and the intelligence reports in US tell, that Pakistan is now sliding towards the eastern camp. Pakistan should not be targeted for those reasons. Pakistan should be encouraged, rather than discouraged in a way. Pakistan should be assisted and helped in this regard, because Pakistan is far away from what the West has achieved, how the tools and devices available to them in order to counter such transactions, So that is important, that they should help support Pakistan rather than moving it the other way around. Don't use it as a political pressurizing tactics on Pakistan to fulfill your regional desires, your regional interests in Afghanistan. So that is not the way forward. That is going to cause a lot of trouble for the war on terror globally. Pakistan has suffered a lot and given a lot in those terms, I would say.
Absolutely. When we talk about this latest move, sir, of putting Pakistan on the grey list in the FATF now, there's a perception among certain quarters in Pakistan that it is because the US wants to heap further pressure on Pakistan in alliance with India. So that demonstrates bad faith on the part of the US. That is the perception. Would you agree with that, sir?
I think I would take an exceptions to this view and probably would not go along with the main idea. What I advocate and submit is that we need to study the basic mandate of FATF. What is it? What does it do? What is its mandate? And I'm sure everybody knows that FATF is a benevolent body, and it is for the benefit of the country, the international system and its members, that is the countries like Pakistan. Whatever it does, it is to enable the states to take anti-money laundering legislations, regulations and measures, as indeed the anti-terror financing measures, so that the international system is stabilized, and more importantly that country itself contributes positively towards the regime that has been set forth by the international community under UNSC resolutions 1373 that was passed immediately after 9/11, and a prior very important resolution of 1267 that calls for the countries to take measures of finances and other location of the terrorist organization in a particular country, so that it can help the international community to stabilize and can contribute towards clamping down onto the international terrorism. So that is what the mandate of FATF is. It does not operate under the big power influence or something, because the countries who have economic clout, they have enough GDP and they have enough population, they are its members, and they follow the enforcement of the regulation and rules that have been accepted by the international community under UNSC Charter or UNSC resolutions, and that is what its mandate is. So from that perspective, I think there has been very intense engagement of FATF Asia Pacific group with Pakistan. They had suggested certain measures that please take these measures, especially against those entities that have been declared terrorist or so by the United Nations itself.
Right.
And maybe if we take those measures, then of course what we will do is that we will prove to the international community that we are very sincere against the war against terrorism on behalf of everybody else, and we are a very responsible country. So they have exactly told us what to do. What we need to do is to do those measures, and they are not very difficult.
Right, so it is the implementation aspect which is important. And it's also important for us to understand our own role in the global war on terror, especially when we look at the amount of sacrifices that Pakistan has made and the losses that Pakistan has incurred. Just to give you some figures, I think it's important also to mention here that Pakistan has spent $297 billion rupees in the war on terror in the last 10 years. The United States agreed to pay $132 million for counter-terror efforts to Pakistan, of which only 111 million have been received so far. So Pakistan has already been using its own resources to fight the war on terror, but we are still awaiting the reimbursements that were supposed to come. So is being put on the FATF also going to affect those reimbursements that Pakistan is expecting? And what other problems that Pakistan might face if we are put on that list?
A lot of problems, I would say, as taking loans, foreign direct investment, your banking sector, each and everything will suffer in that regard. As a whole, obviously, the economy will slow down at the moment, for instance. So they are going to be
But is that going to help the war on terror by slowing Pakistan's economy down?
War on terror is a political term. As we have differentiated war on terror fought by USA in Afghanistan from what we are doing within Pakistan.
You see, there seems to be a disconnect. Even after so many years of fighting this war, there are certain quarters that do say that this is not our war. And then we are obviously made to respond and say that it is our war. We have to win it.
Wars, but the wars are different in nature. Because what US is trying to do in Afghanistan, Pakistan has nothing to do with that. And in that regard, Pakistan is also very, in a way, right to say that it's practically impossible for Pakistan to completely stop the cross-border movement of civilians or terrorists in disguise of civilians. So that is a problem. That is an existing problem, and a lot of work needs to be done on that. That's the unfortunate part of FATF or other organizations such. Their mandate is different from what the countries, developing countries like Pakistan, they have a lot of gray areas, gaps, and other issues. So those issues should not be corrected through punishment.
Right.
They should be corrected through assistance, through encouragement. And then that's why I say that the West, especially United States of America, is using it as a political tool to pressurize Pakistan into obedience of, to surrender their national interest, which is, I think, is not a possibility for Pakistan. And doing such a measure, taking such a measure, will be a harsh hammer on the Pakistani side, and it will even worse for the efforts Pakistan so far has made against the war on terror. Whether they acknowledge Pakistan's effort on terror, war on terror, but they do not incorporate it reflect it in their policy statements or policy as such, because it is not in their favor at the moment. Because if they do so, that will obviously complicate. I have mentioned this many times in your program and otherwise as well. India at the moment is their only strong ally in the region. So how can they ignore India? And it is probably doing two tasks for them at the same time. Pakistan is moving on to the other camp, while India is still in the kind of 50-50. Their foreign policy has been very successful. They have been able to make believe the US that they are on their side, and at the same time having a very healthy economic relationship with China
as well as Russia.
And Russia.
Right. So, well, let's talk about the importance of FATF to Pakistan itself, sir. First of all, sir, this Pakistani state's responsibility is to provide a safe and secure country for its citizens. That is also a very important aspect of the FATF, and that means elimination from Pakistan of all non-state actors who embrace terrorism, militancy, and extremism. Now, what has been done to actually achieve that goal, sir? On the ground, when we see certain actions being undertaken by certain groups, it does really give a bad impression of Pakistan to the outside world. How can Pakistani government really make sure that we don't send out negative signals and messages as a result of what's happening on our streets?
I think if I could point out to the basic questions of today's discussion, it is this very question that you have asked. The FATF and its deliberations and what we are fearing and what we are expecting actually revolves or rivets around this question. It is the basic responsibility as a country of ours, that is Pakistan, that there should not be an iota of doubt in the mind of the international community that because Pakistan wants to do it, just because we might not be placing enough emphasis on the particular aspect. That could be the reason. that those entities which have been established as being terrorist by the United Nations, through a process in which the world is involved, in which of course India has a say and China has a say and everybody else has a say. If they have said that, well, these entities, there is an evidence that these entities are terrorists and they have been declared by that organization. So what, as a responsible country, any country should do, that we should take all legal measures, statutory measures. That means we should make laws if they are not there. Just get a law passed from the parliament and say that this is Anti-Money Laundering Act or this is Anti-Terrorist Financial Act or something. And then whatever has been designated to be so in Pakistan, take very clear action and convincing action, so that FATF and its affiliate, once they come and evaluate that, well, the implement, and this is what exactly is their job, and they recommend also that please do implement these things in your country and everything will be perfectly fine. And the best example is that in 2015, once this government passed Anti-Money Laundering Act, then that was the act, that was the moot point, that to take us from the long, 3 years or whatever years long grey list that Pakistan was in from I think 2012 to 2015 also.
So 2009, sir.
And on 2015, therefore, because of that act and its implementation, we were taken out. This also has not come suddenly. In October last year, once there was a session of the FATF, they said that they warned us that, well, we have these questions, could you please look at this and implement that or something? And once they came here in February, there was a whole lot of discussion and Pakistan did provide the answers or something. But maybe what was felt was that they were not adequate or they were not considered adequate. So I will come back to you that the basic responsibility of the government of Pakistan is to fulfill all those commitments that we as a member of the international community have made with the United Nations organization or with other such forums which are for the betterment of humanity. We must believe in that. We must be, and I mean, it's easy to jump to the oft repeated themes of, war on terror, not our recognition in the war on terrorism. The whole world recognizes what Pakistan has done to counter terrorism in the region. That is not the question. But internally, our maybe regime, legal system needs to be made more robust so that we can control the financial and other aspects of anti-money laundering itself is a destabilizing factor, especially for Pakistan.
Right.
We are going through this rigmarole again. So those rules for money laundering must be made strong and implemented, and also for terrorism, counter-terrorism, financial regime should also be made strong.
It's very important, sir, what you have just explained, because too often the demand that Pakistan should be cleansed of militants and terrorists and extremists is labeled as an extremely externally driven agenda to weaken Pakistan. Now, how can we change that perception, Sheraz?
Well, I would say then again, yes, one way of looking at it is definitely the total functional side of such forums or organizations where they totally have a different agenda, and definitely we need to work on that side. Whatever the requirements are, we need to fulfill that. But fine, fair enough, if Pakistan has been able to turn the page around once, it can do it again. That's fine, fair enough. But the important thing is that we need to de-link whatever is taking place in Afghanistan, because this time around it's not about money laundering, it's about terror financing. So that is the difference. Money laundering is both. It's both, but money laundering is more or less something where we have done some work, because that's what has been taking place in the Supreme Court, in the Parliament, the discussions, and such issues which have
Panama leaks and whatnot.
Exactly. So that's what I'm talking about. So, but then again, at the moment, the issue that is circling this watch list related issues is more to do with terror financing. Pakistan has been lacking in that regard. Pakistan has not been able to clearly take some steps in order to totally shun this infrastructure which exists in Pakistan, from where these terrorists basically generate revenue and then exploit that against the Pakistani state as well. There are issues, but I want to differentiate that thing from whatever is again happening in Afghanistan. The Haqqani network, if they say Haqqani network is also taking, is also being financed from Pakistan, how are you going to overcome that blame? The Afghan Taliban are financing themselves from Pakistan. They are having safe havens over here. So how are you going to do separate that? How are you going to win that trust of the United States of America? So what to do about it is basically strengthen yourself. Obviously, there are certain legal issues and there are certain discrepancies which exist in our system. We need to cover them. At the same time, we have to have a very important and parallel relationship, and we have to take on board the regional powers, because I think now it's time that we should work in the regional context. We should see the globe in the regional context rather than individually trying to, in the bilateral terms. So that is not the century of bilateralism. It is a century of multilateralism.
Right. Let's also talk about how important is it, sir, for having, because we've already stated this multiple occasions, that Pakistan has a zero tolerance policy towards all variants of militancy, terrorism and extremism. But how true is that, sir?
I think, yeah, as a word of statement, it might be so that Pakistan has zero tolerance policy, and we should have zero tolerance policy against militancy.
But let me add, sir, there are offshoots of terrorist groups that are hiding behind charitable and welfare organizations. How will they be taken to task, and why should they be tolerated in the first place?
No, I mean, they, of course, a terrorist group in an organized society or in a state like Pakistan cannot declare themselves to be terrorist group and then, function. They will have to have this modus operandi. They would have, exactly, they would have cover names or something else. But then the government is there to detect their intentions. The government has lots of means to know that genuineness of a particular organization. And of course, zero tolerance policy is not for anybody else. Its benefit are directly to Pakistani state and society. Any state where the government has not the total monopoly over the use of force and coercion is destined to get ripped apart, it get fractured or something. And we saw some aspects of this very unfortunate specter in case of Pakistan. We might blame anybody else, but I think we need to re-evaluate our internal situation. And if there are organizations, they are posing to behave in other way than what they portray themselves, then well, I can be hoodwinked, but not the Pakistan's government, not the state of Pakistan. And if that be so, then I think we should take this zero tolerance must be in this field that the state of Pakistan has to exercise. Otherwise, the internal repercussions and the external repercussions, I think they will become difficult to.
We are already going through them.
We are already going.
And a very broad and a general way of resolving this issue. Somebody asks you what's wrong with Pakistan. I personally believe it's the institutional imbalance of power. I've talked about it earlier as well. Unless we achieve that balance between the institutions within the state, I don't think so any effective work can be done in that regard. So first of all, then again, importance is given to the internal cohesion, internal balance, internal interdependence. We don't have to depend on other entities in order to bring about a domination, a dominant factor to us within the state. We need to look for our national interest within among ourselves. So that is the only way forward.
So internal divisions is what you're blaming for the state of affairs?
I would say, why not? States are like organisms.
Right.
And institutions are their organs. So if one institution grows or overdevelops, that's fine, fair enough. For a time being, maybe it may sustain the organism, but otherwise the organism will stay static, and that's the case with the imbalanced state. I call them the imbalanced state because Pakistan is neither a failed state nor a weak state. Then
well, let me ask you, Sheraz, that how important is it or how necessary is it to understand that Pakistan is at the moment on the wrong side of a global consensus when it comes to policies that countries are uneasy with Pakistan when it comes to the issue of terror financing, which is why we are having this program in the first place. So how do we address their problems?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. That is one way. A general resolution to this problem is obviously looking at the institutional imbalance. But the other important thing is I'm unable to understand Pakistani response, because now what I see a kind of direct confrontation between Pakistan and US, a soft confrontation at the moment, if we may say. So that's what is taking place at the moment. So we need to avoid that. In order to keep that alive, in order to keep it active, we have taken certain foreign policy measures in the recent past, which are going to have repercussions in the future. So that is not the way forward. We should not be reactive. We should not be emotional state. We need to settle down. We need to answer these difficult questions with certainty and cohesion, with what you call with a settled mind.
Right.
A mind which is not settled, which is in a state of panic, will never be able to come up with a conclusive answer how to get them on board.
So why is there, and let me ask you this, why is there this lack of clarity in our policies? Sir, would you also like to answer this question?
Yeah, but then from the thesis that it is the internal balancing that states have to do, it is the internal factors, it is a society that has to be integrated, and state being an issue of the society itself and all that, why do we hastily go to external factors?
Exactly.
I mean, first we need to stabilize our own society. Very oft repeated phrase of putting our house in order.
Right.
And I don't know, we are not very fond of introspection. That means looking inwards. We are very predisposed to looking outside toward confrontation with United States,
and also we like to play the victim.
Or elsewhere. And that is not a good. We are a very powerful country. We are a very dignified country. We can do anything positive. Pakistan is heart of Asia and whatever. It was not to encourage this phrase was.
But
not
do you think that maybe our
national
national psyche of procrastination also has some element to play in the way or the reasons why we are reactive, as Sheraz was talking about? Why we are
trained
always
in a way. We have been trained as a security state.
Very, very right. But what I will conclude, I mean, this argument is that we have to look inwards. Huh? If there are problems, I think the roots lie within us, and we need to correct them. And there is no harm in doing that. I mean, it is not always India, it is not always Afghanistan. Permit me to say, it may be that if we corrected our internal, and we are very much capable of doing that. We have just done it. I think we are a little carefree in probably managing our internal affairs or something. And there are very great minds out here, and we should look inside first. FATF, it is why it has happened, why there are, the whole world, for example, except for China, Russia, or a few others, why are they there? They are not there on the purpose that they want to punish or harm Pakistan. I don't think so. It is like that.
Even countries like China and Pakistan, sir, cannot in perpetuity avert their gaze, sir, from the presence in Pakistan of militant and terrorist elements.
And I would add over here, because as said earlier, that it's not India that we have problems over here. It's not Soviet Union that we are facing this situation. So it's. And then again, one day, we cannot blame China for what happened to us. So that needs to be clearly, it should be a narrative.
Well, just to add a few things that Rana Afzal, our finance minister, has said, that the government has taken steps to check smuggling and foreign currency smuggling, as well as taken steps against counterfeiting foreign currency. That is also important steps that have been taken by the government. So I suppose that the government is working on this particular issue to solve this.
Definitely.
And it's very important that it is solved in Pakistan's favor.
But how are you going to stop that thing at the
You can't ask me that, Shiraz. You're
No,
not
I'm
allowed to
not
ask
asking-
me
I'm
any
just
questions.
asking the
I'm going to
minister-
ask you a question.
Minister the question, how are they going to do that?
Well, let's move on to our second topic, which is the repatriation of our Afghan brothers. And I think that's also very important when it comes to Pakistan's fight against terrorism, in support of the global fight against terrorism, because we also find that a large number of terrorists are found hiding among the refugee population in Pakistan, sir. How are we going to address this, sir? It's a very delicate topic, sir. We've talked about it before as well.
That's right. It's a very delicate topic. We have hosted them for, I think, 30
30
years or something. And then suddenly we have found out that there are terrorists that are operating amidst those refugees. And then we have suggested that they must go back, and they must go back immediately or something. This is very peculiar, and we probably have not taken this decision as a society at the political level. It's not an inclusive decision, probably. We often talked of knee-jerk reactions from our policymakers or something. Well, if an issue is debated and we reach to this conclusion as a nation that Afghan refugees must go back, and we coordinate with the world community, and before that we coordinate with Afghanistan that it should be an organized return, a dignified return, as they said.
Sir, I also want to, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, because many of the Afghans are born in Pakistan.
That's true.
In other countries, if a Pakistani is born in the US, he becomes a US citizen and also has the option of having a dual citizenship. So can there be some kind of a mechanism for Afghans who are born in Pakistan? Can they be given dual citizenships? Can something be done to facilitate them? Because obviously Afghanistan is at this point in time not capable of absorbing 3 million Afghan refugees. It will create further problems for the Afghan government itself. So what's your opinion on that, sir?
Yes, I think very, very nice point. Not only this, but there could be many other acts of accommodation and facilitation of the Afghan people here. Now, I think if they came in, somebody came in 1980 or something, it must be a middle-aged man or a woman born in Pakistan who might themselves have kids or something.
Absolutely, and they probably consider themselves more Pakistani than Afghan because they were born here.
Yes, I mean, this is a political reality that has turned into a social reality also. I mean, there is a lot of sociology, socio-economic reality about lives of millions of people in a land that they were, welcomed as guests, honored guests and all that. And once we did that, the people in Pakistan, they said, okay, we are calling them, they're welcome, they're our brothers, but then in the ultimate analysis, this might happen. And one of those factors was Pakistan's own, we had a particular societal profile or profiles, we had a particular culture that was impacted by the culture of these refugees, and therefore there were many good things and many unwanted things that might have happened in our society. Now we want to settle them back. Oh, that's a very good step. But these factors, sociological factors, anthropological factors, the cultural factors, would have to be taken into account and catered for in the manners that the countries they cater for with this kind of situation, like immigration rules, dual nationalities, things of that sort or something of that sort. I mean, owning of businesses in one country while they are residing in another country.
Would that not also build a lot of goodwill, sir, among the Afghan population and the Pakistanis if we were to facilitate the Afghans in certain ways, maybe give them
I think,
some kind of a recognition for being born in this country?
What should happen is, and what was intended to be, that once we welcomed 3 million and more Afghan refugees over a period of time, our intent was that we should build Pakistan's goodwill and show them our brotherhood to the ones who were in adversity at that time. I think this basic principle must continue, that whatever we do with Afghan refugees with the help coordination with Afghan government and the world community, Pakistan's goodwill and the effort that we, the so-called, well, if you call it a sacrifice, that the Pakistani society extended towards the Afghan brethren, it must be honored, valued, and it must be nurtured. That, well, Pakistan as a society did this for us. Afghans should remember for generations to come, and it should evolve into a fraternal relationship between the two countries. I fully agree with you.
Well, I hope, sir, that they can take such steps, but who knows what's going to happen. But Sheraz, what about the economic problems that the Afghan refugees are going to be facing if they are repatriated to Afghanistan? Because if you really look at it, the conditions which forced the Afghans to take refuge in Pakistan back in the 1980s are no different from the conditions in 2017.
2018.
Oh,
yes.
2018, sorry.
Yes, obviously. The important thing is how the international community is responding to it. Because the UNHCR has half the the repatriation amount. It was
No,
400
they've doubled it. I'm sorry to correct you there. The
Four-
UN,
four-
yes, they've doubled,
Doubled it.
for those Afghan refugees who are going back to Afghanistan. They've doubled the financial
It was
assistance.
$400 US dollars, somewhere around there.
Well, I'm not exactly sure
So-
about the amount, but I do know
Then
that it
pro-
has been
the
doubled.
problem then again is how are you going to keep them there? The situation in Afghanistan is not friendly enough that they, because early on some 400,000 people, refugees left for Afghanistan and 100,000 came back to Pakistan again. And then the problem of registered refugees and unregistered refugees.
Right.
So you are not clear that how many Afghan refugees you have been hosting over there, because the registered number is somewhere 1.2 million registered Afghan refugees. And according to an assessment, that is 2.7 million refugees in Pakistan, registered and unregistered. So that is going to be an uphill task, because situation in Afghanistan is not a friendly situation for civilians to move on there. And the people who have lived in a peaceful manner in Pakistan, obviously it is difficult for them to take the decision. And I don't see the international environment as such at the moment is helpful or encouraging for them to move, because the flow of man-to-man information or human-to-human information is so much over there, so there's so much cross-border activity that they clearly understand their chances of survival in Afghanistan, which are near to none. So that is more important. Livelihood and life. Survival is more important than livelihood. You have to survive first. So that is going to be a very uphill task. And I think it is difficult for Pakistan to force that repatriation.
Well, this is the problem here, you see, because Pakistan has been giving extension upon extension, which is like a month's extension, then another month's extension, then another month's extension. We've seen, I think, 3 or 4 extensions already. But does that solve the problem? Isn't it more important to have a proper, well thought out, long-term phase-out plan, which actually addresses the issue on the grassroots level?
Because the important part over here is Pakistan is making all the effort. What's happening from the other side, from the Afghan side? Because they are not ready to take them back at the moment. At the moment, they are not ready to take them back. So is the case with the United States of America. Pakistan is the only one who's pushing that we want them to go back home in a dignified way. Obviously, we don't want people to go back home and come back as terrorists against to be used against Pakistan. Obviously, so we want a dignified repatriation of these refugees. But then again, the issue is Pakistan only in isolation by itself cannot do. This is such a massive task.
Right.
They have been here for 3 decades, more than 3 decades, and their number is such a huge number. And if you count the amount of refugees or amount of Afghanis that have traveled from Afghanistan to Pakistan and stayed at least a year or 2, it's going to be more than 3 million.
Right.
It's going to be in probably 10 million, 20 million. So that is the problem. That needs to be resolved in collaboration with Afghanistan and the forces, the US presence in Afghanistan as well. So it cannot be done by Pakistan only, simply. And yes, it is one of the reasons. That's what Chief of Army Staff has mentioned, that there is an issue because there are terrorists living among these refugees, and it is difficult for us to separate them from there. So there are issues that relate to terrorist-related activities. There are issues that relate to terrorist-related financial transactions. Yes, there are. But in order, if you push us and pressurize us to do something about it, then first of all, we have to move this chunk of refugees in a dignified way to the other side, make sure that all the external factors have been taken care. But if that's not the case, then I think this pressurizing tactics and this, because on the one side, you see this FATF issue, on the other side, Pakistan responds with moving the refugees. It has been in the process earlier on. But why this all of a sudden, movement of movement of issues and movement and surfacing of issues between the two countries? Why is that taking place? Why they are not supporting each other in a way they were supporting each other earlier on? So this New Year tweet by Donald Trump has changed the situation altogether. Yes, this has made Pakistan to and Pakistan should be more preemptive and get out of that condition which you have mentioned,
Playing the victim.
playing the victim and being lazy at doing things.
Oh, yeah,
we should
procrastinating.
Procrastination. So
Yes.
we need to be preemptive
Yes.
if we want to see something different. Because currently, what I see, I may be wrong about it, but currently only 600 kilometers of our border is safe
On the Afghan side.
on the China side.
Right.
Rest of all of our borders are either they are insecure or they're getting insecure. And with China, it's obviously interest based. That can then again we cannot blame China for what we have done.
Right. Okay, sir. Moving on, one of the concerns that has been voiced over and over again is about the terrorists fighting refuge among the refugees. That is a really important issue of concern to Pakistan. So how do we deal with that aspect? If we are to also, show us our hospitality, show them our hospitality, and also, try to facilitate them with dignity. At the same time, we also have to face the menace of terrorists hiding among them. How do we deal with this, sir?
Well, I think at the face of it, it must be looking very complex issue that there are, and it is true, not only terrorists could operate in the guise of the refugees, the drug dealers,
All kinds of criminal activities.
the
sir.
criminal gangs and organized crime within this community could also take refuge of the refugees, and that is it. So I would again go back. As a state, we played host to them, so they came and settled. Their settlement was our responsibility. Their tracking and their tracing, their identity was our responsibility. We accepted them in millions, and it is a very long process. And by now, just like we scan and secure our own populace, we should have had the methods. We know where we have ourselves settled them. I hope they didn't go places at their own or something.
Well, now they're spread all over the country.
They have spread all over the country, but then so is our. Let's take them to be part of, let's say, Pakistan's population from that purpose. They should have had an identity, identity card, and if they had to travel abroad, because they should enjoy all the facilities of freedom or free citizen or something. But of course, under certain constraint that should be laid out.
Regulations.
They should never have used Pakistani passport. They should never have used our NIC.
But they have in the past.
But they have. I mean, because I don't know. They have. There are, I think, thousands, if not whatever, NICs that are used by them. So they have practically any crime or any activity that did outside. So what passport, who would they be labeled as Pakistanis, as our people or something of that sort? So that has happened, I think, and it is a very dangerous act. Similarly, there is no doubt that terrorists would also be there amidst them